Microphones are on. Can we call the meeting?
Now, in past years, this presentation was done by me.
Which one? The housing approvals?
Mark. I was municipal liaison for the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association.
All right, we're going to call the meeting to order.
She's going to lose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have received one other business item in advance of this meeting. It concerns cigarette butt cleanup and was raised by Councillor Zrillo.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything? All right.
Item 1 is the minutes of the Council and Committee meeting held on Monday, May 1st. I would like to note, Madam Chair, that we have 2 points potentially to be amended. The first is on page 4. The first paragraph should read introductory comments by the General Manager of Planning and Development.
Okay.
And second was raised by a member of the committee on page 3, bullet point 7. The member of the committee just requested clarification on this bullet point, so if approved by members of the committee, it could read as follows. Both the cities and other various municipalities express support for the Riverview lands to be used for mental health purposes, in revision to the bullet point that was noted there.
Anyone in committee here have objection to that change?
Moved as amended.
Second. All in favor? Anyone opposed?
Item 2 is our first delegation from Mr. Mark Sakai, Director of Government Relations from the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association. Mr. Sakai will be presenting the key findings of the GVHBAâs recently released housing approval study.
Welcome, Mark. So I think we have quite a few people in the audience today that aren't usually here. So I guess the reason I'm chairing today is we have a cycle of acting mayor, and the person that's the acting mayor runs the committee meeting. So Mayor Stewart, did you want to make some comments just before we start? Because there's quite a few faces in here. I'd like to give you a chance.
Yes, this is a policy that we've adopted for this term, the last couple of years. The acting mayor has chaired both the committee of the whole, or council and committee, and the, just for your reference, the closed meeting as well. And we find that's really helpful. It goes around every member of council serves for 6 weeks as acting mayor, and I think that's a good thing. It shares the duties a little bit. And I also wanted to comment, as Mark's in front of me, because many years ago, that was me. I was the municipal liaison director for the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association. I was never a builder, but I was involved a lot in housing affordability issues and regional housing policy, and that would have been me. You're probably going to do it much better than I did.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Okay, welcome, Mark. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe this means that one day I'll be mayor.
You never know.
So,
But set your sights a bit higher.
thank you for allowing me to make this presentation in front of you. It's nice to see some of you. I saw some of you just last week up at LMLGA. My name is Mark Sakai. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association. A little bit of background about the association. We represent residential construction in Metro Vancouver. We have just over 1,000 member companies that are split. Roughly half are builders, developers, and renovators. The other half are suppliers, trades, and other companies that support the industry. For context, approximately 2 out of every 3 houses or housing units built in Metro Vancouver is built by one of our member companies. The industry is very large and has significant economic impact. In Coquitlam alone, there's an estimated 5,200 on-site and off-site jobs related to residential construction and renovation. That represents about a little over $300 million in annual wages. A little bit of background about this report. Some of you may realize that we did this is the 3rd report of its type. The first 2 reports were called Getting to Groundbreaking and were completed in 2014 and 2016. Each report is based on a particular housing type. The first report looked at townhouses. The second report looked at low-rise wood frame apartment buildings. And this report, which we released in the first week of April is looks at infill housing, infill single family. And the reason why we specifically looked at infill rather than all single family is that we didn't want to include greenfield developments because we wanted to include as many municipalities in Metro Vancouver as possible, and greenfield really only applies to about 4 or 5 municipalities, whereas infill includes virtually everyone. So you've all seen, we sent a copy of the report to everyone, so I hope you have one and at least had a chance to glance through it. I do have a couple other copies in case someone wants to see it. A lot of people focus on pages 22 and 24, which is the cost and time. I'm not going to focus on that today because I think we all realize that time and cost really depends on a lot of factors, a lot of different types of building units, the quality of the application. So I'm not going to really dwell on that. I'd really much rather spend time talking about some of the things on, say, infill housing, and related to why infill housing works well in these areas. If you look at page 14, there's the map of the Lower Mainland, and that it shows the areas which are single and duplex zoned in the Metro Vancouver. And the lightest color shows that there's a significant amount of land zoned single family or duplex in the Lower Mainland. In fact, about 64% of all the residential land is zoned for single and detached. On pages 18 and 19, you'll see that the graph, the bar chart, shows the top 3 lines are the duplex, triplex, fourplex, single family with secondary suites, and row housing. A lot of that is what we call the missing middle housing. And you'll see that approximately 29.5% in 2016 in Metro Vancouver was made up of those 3 types of housing. In Coquitlam, that figure is about just over 26%. So there's about 3% difference in terms of the makeup of housing between of the sort of missing middle ground-oriented housing between Metro Vancouver and Coquitlam. So if you look on pages 18 and 21, you'll see that there's the types of housing that you see there. The first one on page 18 is a triplex. The one on page 21 is a quadplex. So you can have this type of missing middle without significantly changing the sort of character of the neighborhood. Oh, that's my time is up. So that's
keeping to that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
There's a lot more I wanted to talk about, but that's my time. So.
If you want an extra minute, I'm happy to give it if you want to do
Okay, I'll take, so pages 18 and 19 really talk about the benefits of this type of housing, and really it comes down to using that large proportion of single-family and duplex zone land more efficiently. Most of that zone land will really only allow you to replace that single-family house with one single-family house and perhaps a secondary suite. So that, as we can see, has created a serious affordability issue because that land value can only be shared with one house. So why not look at opportunities to split that land value amongst 2, 3, or 4 households to create a more affordable situation? The other thing I really wanted to emphasize was on page 10. And page 10 talks about the best practices and the ways that local governments can implement this type of housing and how we can make it happen more efficiently. And this is the type of thing that some of the things that Coquitlam is also already doing quite well, but there are things that can be done better to try to address this idea of creating more diverse types of housing choices for people within the single-family areas. And this is another one of these areas where GVHBAâ would be very pleased to collaborate with Coquitlam and work with your staff and council to try to find ways to do this better. We've done things in the past, and we're very happy to do things like builders forums and find ways to have our builders work with your staff.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you very much. As you may know, and I think since we've talked about it before, Coquitlam does try to lead on some of these facets of trying to make sure that our residential land is used better. We know that our neighborhoods are typically quarter-acre gross density, unlike Vancouver, which is a higher density from the outset. But quarter-acre is still a really low land use in a zone, in a region that's as constrained as we are and that has to absorb 1 million people, probably almost all of them on the existing developed footprint. So we absolutely are with you on so much of that. One of our challenges is quality control at the desk, and we appreciate your advocacy for somewhat tighter restrictions at the receipt, at the point of receipt, so that if it's not a good quality application, if it's not a complete application, we'll put it that way, it gets sent back to be completed, not by someone else. Our job shouldn't be to rewrite their application. It should be, because our challenge, of course, as municipalities is we're all competing with you as industry for the planners and the land use and the various experts that are needed in order to process these applications. On the pre-zoning side, I would urge you to join with us, because municipalities do have very few tools, and they're all regulated by the Local Government Act, and one of them permits us at zoning to more powers than it does if we pre-zone. So if we pre-zone, we lose a whole bunch of the capacity of a community to be able to get infrastructure built at the appropriate moments for the appropriate developments. And so even though I've been at that side of the table, I've long been hesitant to go down the pre-zoning route, because it does change it eliminates the possibility of a whole bunch of things that the taxpayer will be stuck having to pay for in order to support development. And that could produce resistance to development, which is the exact opposite effect. So we'd urge you to join with us in advocating the provincial government for really a modernization of the process, so that we don't see that kind of thing. The other reality, of course, is the process as it is for land use approvals. We often get criticized by folks at the provincial level saying we're not zoning fast enough, we're not zoning as aggressively, and yet we're facing a system that asks the public, asks the neighborhood to whether or not they veto a particular densification, and that process is somewhat challenging, given that the region has to accept density, but each individual municipality doesn't have to. Coquitlam accepts more than its fair share in some ways, and I urge us to continue to do that so that we can manage as much as possible to avoid the kinds of price increases that we've seen recently. But in the end, it requires municipalities to be courageous. And so the kinds of changes that you and I have talked about seeing whether we can ensure that responsible development is encouraged rather than discouraged by the structures around approvals. So I send you back with that.
Chris, or Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. The picture you had on page 21 of the fourplex, is that basically a duplex with suites?
Page 21. No, I believe that one is actually a quadplex, so there's 4 ownership units included in that. I believe that one's in Vancouver somewhere.
That's interesting. We have that option of building fourplexes, but don't seem to get much uptake on it. Everybody wants to build 2 single-family houses with basement suites.
You know, as I said before, there's a lot of opportunities to do that type of thing, especially in the larger lots, corner lots, and I think in Vancouver it's in the RT area zones. That's where you've seen this type of thing. You've seen quite a bit of it in Kits in the RT zone. I think you're starting to see some of it in the Grandview, Woodlands RT areas. So, and it's a way to particularly in some of these areas that are close to transit, where the parking requirements may not be as significant. It does produce a good potential for this type of unit. And an idea is not to use a blanket zone the entire single-family ERS areas to allow quadplexes. I mean, there are areas where it makes more sense, and there's areas where it doesn't make sense. So it's a matter of finding those areas and providing those choices for people.
But why do you think builders are willing or interested in doing it in Vancouver but not in Coquitlam?
It could be that the higher land value is pushing it towards that.
Thanks.
Yeah, and because you can build 4 units and sell 4 units. Yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Asmundson?
Well, thank you. I looked over on page 10, I think, summary of your recommendations. I think most of the recommendations, other than pre-zoning, we're already into or have done already. When you look at the gatekeeper, we have that. What I pushed for a number of years, we're getting into it for what's showing your infill housing, your electronic application process, and that's starting out in that to help improve the process and moving our stuff. When you did your study, do you take into account the delays that are caused by developers, consultants? Because a lot of times when the city will get an application in and we'll look at the deficiency lists that need to go back, but sometimes it can sit with the consultant for 2 months. Do you take that in consideration when you do the study?
In general, what we're trying to do is look at the time for an average or a reasonable, not absolutely perfect and not absolutely perfect, in immediate response time, but what is sort of the typical situation. So, in a situation where you have high quality applications, the number of deficiencies is typically lower. And if you have a high quality applicant, they should be able to respond to those deficiencies in a quicker manner. But so much depends on. This is why, like I said, I'm not spending so much time on the time, because it's so variable and it depends on so many different factors.
Yeah, and at times we've been used as, and we've set up a system where we pre-check. And if you don't go in the queue, you go back out until, because we are being used for times like a quality control for.
Yeah, and that's certainly not,
not helping anybody.
No, and certainly the GVHBAâ sort of advocates for this gatekeeper function and for municipalities to look at this risk-based approach to both intake and processing permits and also for inspections.
Also, we have I think for most cities, we have quite a broad range from, single family, duplexes, splits. We have the housing choices, which allows from 3, 4, and we've had in those ones also like a duplex front and back, separate units and stuff like that. So we've seen that, but we've seen, as Councilor Will said, most of the 2-lot splits, and I guess maybe that's because they feel is easier to get through council.
And it could be because of some of the requirements requiring road frontage or lane front access to allow the coach houses and the carriage homes, that it makes it more restrictive. In other places where you don't necessarily need to have that lane access to do a front back duplex, you don't necessarily need to have that vehicular access to do a coach house or carriage house or garden suites, as they're called in some areas.
And I think there's coming a report later tonight, but one of the issues that we always find when the development's probably the overriding issue is always going to be about when you densify and more infill housing is parking. How do you deal with the parking? How do you fit the parking in to satisfy the neighborhood's concerns? And at the municipal end, that's where we get tagged with the difficulty in densification, because we're on the front lines. It's easier for somebody else to say, with this provincial government, that you guys must radically increase your densification, but they're not the ones dealing directly with the public in those neighborhoods.
It is probably the biggest issue that councils have to deal with when talking about any form of densification is how to deal with the cars. And I can only say what we've said in response to those issues in other municipalities is it would be very interesting to do a survey of the garages in these neighborhoods to see how many cars can be parked in those garages as they currently are configured, and how many are so full of things that they make it impossible to park cars.
Oh, we've discussed that a number of times, and we haven't come up with a solution. I don't know anybody's come up with a solution with that yet. But hopefully we will, because it is, I will agree, but it still relates to the issue about in the neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting that you said about the survey of the garages. Councillor Wilson and I just spoke about that this afternoon, where we do need to get some actual data about what's in these garages and how they're being used, because especially in Coquitlam up in Burke Mountain, 400 square feet just for storage is That's a big investment. While I have you here, I just, Mayor Stewart kind of alluded to it, but it's become evident in the research that we've been doing at the City of Coquitlam that the missing middle seems to be townhouses, even more than infill housing. And we have tracked very well. I think we have 68% single family and duplex, so we're tracking pretty good in Coquitlam. But that, if you could just put a word in the association members' ear, that we would love to see more townhousing opportunities come forward in Coquitlam. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Okay, thank you again for having me.
Thank you. If you ever get that survey on the garages, let us know.
For a solution.
Item 3 is a delegation from Mr. Farshid, Rafiei, and Mr. J. Leduc. They will be speaking to a density increase for North Burquitlam sub-area C.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us.
You know you have 5 minutes
Yes,
for the presentation? Perfect.
I'm practicing. All right. Thank you all for inviting us to this opportunity to address you today. Okay, perfect. There we go. My name is Jay Leduc, and this is Farshid Rafiei. We are neighbors. Farshid's been a resident for 10 years. I've been a resident for 15. We've been working with the city since 2012, and we represent more than 100 property owners and residents who signed our third petition from our immediate area of North Burquitlam sub-area C on the OCP map. Although we applaud the changes to the zoning to increase our density, we believe it doesn't go far enough. We are requesting a revision to the draft OCP to allow more gentle densification. Okay. Our location is represented by the red dashed lines which border Port Moody at Ingersoll Avenue, Clark Road, Miller Avenue, and also Miller Park Ravine. We are a 5-minute walk to Miller Park Elementary, Banting Middle School, a 10-minute walk down to Port Moody Senior Secondary, and also to the new Burquitlam SkyTrain stations. And we're a 7-minute drive approximately up to SFU. Most of the current housing in our area are 50-plus years old and a mix of single-family homes and duplexes. So here are some examples of the homes in our area. And as you can see at the top on Miller Avenue, there's the new fourplexes that are being built on Miller Avenue as well. Here also we are adjacent to the multifamily 3-story apartments in Port Moody, which are circled here in red on the Port Moody OCP map at the top of Clark Road Hill and at the end of Grant Street. So on this slide, we have the draft OCP map dated March 22nd, 2017, where we are zoned for housing choices circled in red. And this slide shows the changes we're requesting. We're looking at housing choices to townhomes in the orange, single-family housing to housing choices in the blue, and up in the pink area, highlighted area above is the 3-story apartments on the Port Moody side of Ingersoll Avenue, and the multifamily zoned area surrounding us in brown as well. Just keep going, or
one slide, please.
Back? Want to go back one? There we go.
What street is that goes through the housing choices blue?
That would be Grant. Oh, through the blue, that's Catherine.
Catherine.
Part of Catherine.
Okay, just I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. All right.
Got it?
Keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
Yeah. Go.
All right. So here's another view. Where am I here? Okay, here we go. In this slide, it's clear how close we are to the 3-story apartments that we're requesting, townhomes. As you can see, Ingersoll Avenue, which is the Port Moody Coquitlam border, the whole length of Ingersoll Avenue is the 3-story apartments on the Port Moody side. And also on part of Grant Street, it's already zoned for townhouses, and also on part of Catherine and on part of Ingersoll. There's a section there already zoned for townhouse zoning. So we have 3 examples, some case studies we've made. The first example is housing choices, and this would be 16 units with 24 parking spaces with access from the lane off of Catherine. Our second example would be another 16 units of housing choices with 28 parking stalls with access off of Grant Street. And third example is our requested row houses of 24 units with 80-plus parking stalls with access off of Catherine as well. So here's just an example of what a typical row home or townhouse would look like. It would be approximately 1,600 square feet of living space, and then also your parking as well underneath in the basement. For example, in our area, there's not much when it comes to this style. The new high-rise Crown by Beatty in Burquitlam, out of 200 units, there are only 16 three-bedrooms, and they're only 1,000 square feet each. The Polygon homes in Cottonwood, out of 140 units, there are no three-bedrooms available. And the Blue Sky Apartments, out of 190 available units, there are no three-bedroom as well. So this is just a cross-section view of what the row homes would look like, and would be no higher than the existing buildings in the area. So this slide here just gives you a breakdown of the differences between the three examples. The density is increased slightly in the row house option 3, but with it you'll gain a slightly more private outdoor space than the other options due to optimizing the land use. It also provides more additional off-street parking due to being able to provide parking under the buildings as well.
Sure.
So why revision and higher density? The land area in the current OCP plan in North Burquitlam may be underutilized. As it stands, many lots, for example, duplex lots, will not allow for quadruplexes due to the insufficient land size or lane access. They can build duplexes again, but there is no benefit to doing so, and this will not address the affordability issues. So it will definitely rejuvenate our neighborhood. These older homes that we have in our area on larger lots provide an opportunity to consolidate properties into land assemblies, optimizing the land usage and in turn providing more affordable housing. And this is all in accordance with the Coquitlam's housing affordability strategy. So the gentle densification of this area will provide a better opportunity for sustainable development of the area rather than monster houses or individual quadruplexes. It's affordable housing by allowing lot assemblies. It'd be a peaceful place for young families and elders in the neighborhood using the schools and parks. And it can definitely be an innovative, diverse, safe, and complete community. This change will definitely maximize future development potential by allowing lot assemblies. And really it'll attract the young families with kids that cannot fit into like three-bedroom apartments and high-rises and can't afford the single-family detached homes as well. It will also optimize land use and maximize the green space. It'll have a better parking strategy, having a lot more off-street parking as well. And it'll maximize Coquitlam's OCP density in a sustainable manner. And it'll bring in more taxes to the city by sustainable development in the next 10 years. So takeaways and key points from our presentation: housing affordability. There's one fourplex that's almost finished in completion, about 5 weeks away from completion, and they're looking at selling each one of those for $1.3 million, which is unaffordable. So we're actually places for younger families and seniors this would definitely help out by adding row homes or townhouses. Definitely better accessibility for walking to the SkyTrains and schools and shopping centers. The parking arrangement definitely would show more off-street parking, and it'd be a sustainable development. Thank you very much, and we would like to consider we would like your consideration for amending the OCP to accommodate our request. Thank you.
Councillor Hodge.
Yes, thank you for coming in. Very good presentation, very well done. Thank you. And perhaps we could get a copy of that as well for future reference. Going back to the slide that in red you outlined the number of homes that you're actually talking about, and I missed. Did you actually give a number? Back up one more. Right in that area, that area. How many homes does that represent in total, and how many of them have sort of signed your petition requesting this?
Well, I'm not quite sure on the total amount, but I've gone around for the last 2 months and gotten over 110 signatures from residents and homeowners supporting our petition to get this changed. And I've gone through everybody in there and around the outside of our zoning request as well.
And there's support outside?
Yes, outside as well, yeah.
Okay.
The neighboring streets behind us also support it, and all around us.
And as I say, look, you've done a lot of work on this. Have you been in discussions with our staff at the counter, or gone through some of this with our staff to this point?
Yes, go ahead. Farshid, you want to?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Yes, this is the third time. The first time that we started negotiation with staff, it was 2012. The first OCP had a line between Grand Street. So all we were envisioning is to have a complete and harmonized neighborhood. So we were requesting to move the line from the center of the street to allow us to have the same character for both sides of streets. This was the first petition in 2012. Early 2016, this request got approved. But as soon as the request got approved, we realized that the area on white that is dashed in the map, we realized that is zoned to townhouses, and that is just at the corner of our street.
In front of me, is zoned or proposed to be zoned? Is it currently zoned, or is that part of the?
Side by side.
It's showing it on the OCP.
On the proposed, on the new one, so that hasn't come in yet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Designated.
So we did the second request in October 2016, requesting this change, but we were rejected in December 2016. So this is the third time that we are going and getting more signatures from all the
immediate
neighbors.
neighborhood. Yeah.
And of course, during the neighborhood planning process that's been underway, you've submitted this comment as part of that process that's been underway then.
Absolutely, and many neighbors did that.
Yeah, we've gone to all the open houses and added to the open houses with the sticky notes and everything. So.
Oh, he just said magic.
I can relate. I'm in favor.
You won him over. Just saying sticky notes. I love sticky notes.
Yeah, inside council joke. Okay, no, it's interesting. I guess a question to staff, and we've had a similar presentation from another area that came forward just recently. Sort of said what's being proposed in the neighborhood plan that's coming forward isn't where we would like to go as our group of neighbors in this smaller area. And I'm just wondering at this point, given where we are, we're first reading, what is the process? And maybe staff could answer what is the process to consider the request at this stage.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, good afternoon, committee members. I can provide some opening remarks. If I miss anything, I'll look to my colleague, Andrew Merrill, who's, as council is aware, is the project manager on the Burquitlam Lougheed Neighborhood Plan. First around this...
sorry, this is Mr. McIntyre speaking now. He's our General Manager of Planning and Development. Okay.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. In this area here, my understanding is it's been in evolution. There was some, as I think as council is aware, a number of iterations in the draft plan, looking at different options, and that's evolved over time. I think, as mentioned, there was a housing choices area that was expanded. Subsequent to that, though, there was a thought about coming forward with the townhouse designation. I think that was late in the process. There was discussion with staff around that, but at this point, it's what we're recommending, or what's there in the draft plan, or the plans received first reading, is for housing choices. The way forward, and I think as Councillor Hodge has alluded to, this isn't the only group in the Burquitlam Lougheed Neighborhood Plan area that's been active through the process, which is great. It's good to see that. But it's coming forward sort of the 11th hour, asking for reconsideration of land use designations in their areas. And that is always an option for council to consider that. The only sort of drawback to that might be if you're going forward to the public hearing, there's a bylaw that has the official community plan with a land use map with certain land use designations. council can make changes to that based on what they hear at the public hearing. In fact, that's one of the purposes of a public hearing. What that would mean, though, is you would be substantially changing the draft plan. Like, you're changing a land use designation, so it would probably trigger either a resumption of the public hearing or the scheduling of a new public hearing and notification. So it is possible. It just adds time to the process. And I guess the second comment would be, if it makes sense, and it's tough to argue with this one, in this area, there may be other areas, sub-areas in the overall Burquitlam low-heat neighborhood plan that would come forward and say, what about us? What about us? And we could be into a number of iterations here and going back and fine-tuning the plan to get it right. Now, at the end of the day, that's council's choice, because really, at the end of the day, it's council's plan. It's the official community plan that's approved by council. The other option would be, and I understand, and maybe Andrew can comment to this in the discussion with this particular group of residents. Council recall there was the policy that's proposed in the plan that allow for OCP amendments. It doesn't, recognizing the plan is not static, there may be some good ideas that come forward. So there was some OCP amendment criteria that I'd imagine this would probably fit into, that then could trigger an OCP amendment. So that, in a way, would enable the city to get the BLMP done. It's been a while in the process. At the same time, not closing the door on these opportunities and these sub areas for unique, specific amendments through that process.
So I think what I heard you say was that if anybody can obviously speak at a public hearing, we will have people speak for and against, I presume. Some may speak against because they want more density. But if council were to make any major changes, it would probably mean taking the plan back and spark a new public hearing. But if we were to pass the OCP as presented, the opportunity then exists in the next step to come back and ask for amendment to a plan that we just passed, essentially.
Through the chair, precisely.
Okay, good, thank you.
Mayor Stewart.
I want to thank you. Granted, there's a process, and feel free to participate in that process as well. And I know you have up till now. And it is, in fact, encouraging. Mark was here a minute ago talking about how we get to, improve densities and such. It's encouraging because sometimes we only hear from people who want lower densities or who want the same. And we do have to hear from those who see that our communities, our neighborhoods have to find ways to gently densify in many cases, and in other cases to radically densify. And this gentle densification, I think, we're ready. I particularly look at Sproul, where those duplexes are 55 years old, and I'm not sure, but they are ready, I think. But there's no way to move from a duplex to a duplex because it's financially not possible. So I'm with the last comment that Councillor Hodge made is probably where I'd be leaning, because I think we do have a process. I don't want to slow that process down, but at the same time, I see the value in what you're suggesting. I think that we all have to try to embrace every neighborhood, and also to sometimes push neighborhoods that are resistant, to see if we can encourage them to see the light. But other neighborhoods that are ready, I think those are ones we have to also embrace their vision to some degree, assuming it meets the planning principles we're all trying to achieve here. So thank you. I do want to thank you for coming out, and I recognize that you're hoping for something fast, and that might not be in the cards, because something fast for this neighborhood would mean slowing down everything else for several square kilometers that we desperately need to fill a bunch of voids in the market right now because of the way the market has changed. So, but I do thank you.
Councillor Osmondson.
Well, a lot of work. Thank you for the amount of work that you're putting into this and your interest in this. I looked quickly through your petition I would estimate you probably have 45, 50 homes, because a lot of 2 to 3 people per household sign a petition. So when you look at just roughly, that's probably the number of households you have. We want to densify. We're looking at this. I think the best thing at this point, you can come to the public hearing, but I think to slow this down or stop it now and go back to more public consultation wouldn't be good. But there is a plan amendment process. I would say, though, that when we look at this and move forward, there's a lot of housing outside your area that may want to have a say within this. That may be some pushback on council. I remember when we did the two housing choices on Miller Avenue, there was pushback in those areas on those already. But I would encourage you, though, to continue working on this. And when I look at, there's some orphaned areas, when I look at, you've got the potential, like that zoning, townhouse zoning, is what we're saying we'd want to have, but we could have pushback at the public hearing or whatever from the landowners in there. So we don't know what's going to happen there, and that's the little part that's not zoned off of Ingersoll there. We don't. So I'd encourage you to work with those areas, to work with those homeowners in those areas, because it's hard sometimes to get something through when you're leaving certain little pocket areas on an island by themselves that don't fit. But I think you guys have done a tremendous job. We've had a couple other people within the area requesting the same type of density increases, but they're also, a lot of them are surrounded by neighbors that are on the opposite side of the fence. So it's going to be interesting. I think the best time for you to, once again, I thank you for coming today. But I think the best time for you is to come at the public hearing and have your voices and all your voices there from your neighborhood that are wanting this to show up at the public hearing, just not yourselves. But if you can get more people out, and between that time, I mean, the public hearing is coming up. If you can get more homeowners in some of those, like I said, especially that corner at Ingersoll and Clark on board, that would, I think, help a lot. Yeah.
Good question. In the public hearing that is coming,
yes.
So is there a chance for revision, or the public hearing is a public briefing? Is plans are solid?
I'll let
So, am I going to answer as the chair, or are you going to answer because it was you?
Staff.
Well, I can let
Suggest we refer to staff.
Misha, or she can ask. She's
And I can provide it to the General Manager of Planning and Development. So the public hearing process would be considering the report that has been given first reading. So it would be the OCP that's been passed, and it's an opportunity for members of the public to provide input on those items that are being considered by council.
With clarity, the OCP hasn't been passed.
Yes.
It's been given first reading, so it's not subject to revision at this point without pulling it and starting over again.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Mr. McIntyre to just summarize, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Madam Chair. May be more specific to get to your question. The public hearing is more than just an airing. It's for the community to come out and to express their feelings, their thoughts, their questions to council. So City Council, as they're hearing, they've heard from staff, our reports. This is now the opportunity for the community to speak. Based on that, council will consider the bylaws, because the bylaws now are sitting at first reading. Is there, on the balance of what they heard, is there enough reason and merit in advancing those bylaws or not? And that's through the democratic process of a voting. And at following a public hearing, council has a couple of different options. They can approve by a vote, a positive vote, the bylaws going forward. They can, an opposite vote would be to decline that bylaw. Basically, it kind of kills it at that point. Or they can refer the bylaw back to staff. Changes can be made in terms of land use. You can reduce land use, the density, at the applicant's permission, but that doesn't really apply here. It's the opposite, and that's what I was getting to before. Increasing density, changing land use is not something you can do, council can't do following a public hearing. They can directly that be done, but then that would trigger the bylaws being amended and they're being brought back for a subsequent public hearing.
Right?
And that would also, once again, put it back to staff. Staff would have to go back out to more public consultation, work through the proposed changes that are brought forward, and that could put a lot of time back before council, if it gets support of the community there. So, but the public hearing is for your opportunity to make your input. At that time, it's council's own decisions on what they decide at that point, or after they hear from the public.
So did you have any other comments, Councillor Asmussen?
that was it.
Okay, was there any other question? We have other speakers, so did you have any other questions for Councillor Asmussen? Or?
No, I don't have any other question. Just for records, we started this request in July 2016, the first time that we came back to staff. And so it's about a year that we are requesting this, just for records, putting this forward. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Well, that's what I was going to ask about, and maybe I'll ask our general manager when this group of homeowners proposed this during the public consultation. Obviously, our staff took that information, considered it, but didn't necessarily agree with it based on what's come forward in the plan.
Madam Chair, if I could ask, with the committee's indulgence, if Andrew can speak to that. As I said, it's my understanding it's evolved through the process, but Andrew can give you more specifics.
Mr. Merrill, is it comfortable for you to just hold the mic, or you're okay?
Come on over here.
All right.
Hi, through the chair. So yeah, this current request is the third request from this group of homeowners. The original one that they referred to back in the early part of the process was for neighborhood attached residential under the Housing Choices program, and that was incorporated into the early drafts of the plan. The second request for townhouses that came in early 2016 was for just the east side of Grant Street, not the wider area including Sproul and Ingersoll. And at the time, that would have involved leapfrogging over some areas that were proposed to remain neighborhood-attached residential, primarily along Sproul and the areas to the south. So at the time, we let the residents know that staff were unable to incorporate that into the draft plan because it would have involved leapfrogging. And then this third request we received on May 1st, which was the day that the report came forward for first reading.
All right. Thank you so much for that background.
Okay, yes, thank you. That's helpful. I can only suggest that you keep the process going as you've been suggested, and we appreciate that you are here as a YIMBY and not an IMBY. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. So the recommendation is we're hoping to see you again at the public hearing and bring along some neighbors with you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think it was more like now in my backyard. Let's get on with it.
Draft Parks, Recreation, and Culture Services Senior Services Strategy. We have intro comments from the General Manager, Parks, Recreation, and Culture Services, and a presentation by the Manager, Community Recreation and Culture Services. The report is before you for information.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
So do we have a presentation?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Mary Morrison-Clark is here, and if Council wishes, we do have a presentation. This is the third report. I think the first report was the introduction of the Senior Strategy Project about just over a year ago. In the terms of reference, we did come forward to Council or to Committee with some key findings in the fall of last year, and this really is the kind of sum total of the work that the consultant has done or staff have done, and also through the consultation process that we've done, which is fairly wide. You'll note, just one thing I would note, so I don't steal Mary's thunder, which I generally do in my opening comments. This is, we've done many strategies over the last few years, brought them forward to Council. This is one of the policy-based strategies, as opposed to some of the capital-based strategies like aquatics or arenas, where we focus on a service area which is facility-based. This is really a policy-based and program-based strategy, so it sits at a slightly different level, and the outcomes are really providing a guidance towards ensuring that over time we focus our services and our resources appropriately to service this growing service area. So with that, I will just give it over to Mary to do the presentation.
Welcome. How many slides do you have?
10.
Perfect.
10. Well, many people got us to this point today. As you can imagine, getting this strategy to this phase is a lot of work. I'd like to specifically thank Corporate Communications for getting this strategy in a format that we feel we can take out for consultation and have people understand it very easily. I'd like to thank the folks in the PRC team who have worked very hard on this, especially Pam Bailey, our research analyst, who was up to her eyeballs in data and feedback and information, getting it all together in an understandable way. And of course, most importantly, the residents of Coquitlam, hundreds of them have provided us input, feedback, their aspirations for their future leisure lifestyle. So it's really a pleasure and an honor to work with that information and from those folks. So with that, I'm just going to cover the process. Of course, the master plan, the PRC draft master plan, is the guiding document that got this all started. And we went through phase 1 with some demographic review and analysis of our own participation data through the class system and other cross-Canada research we did. We had a massive consultation phase with Spark BC. Where we got all kinds of feedback from the community. We presented a key findings report to Council in October, and now we are here with Phase 4 with a draft senior services strategy. From here, of course, we will take the feedback from committee, and then we'll be going out to some of the advisory committees of Council and the Pavilion advisory boards. People, of course, can also give their feedback through me. If they are unable to attend any of those meetings, they can contact me directly through email, phone, or any other way they want to let me know their feedback. And as a reminder, it was mentioned through the report, too, that we are awaiting some final data from Census Canada, and we will be including that in the final strategy, and especially the population growth and some other things that you saw on the table of this strategy that we are waiting for the final update of. It'll be really interesting to see how some of those things change. So in summary of the trends and the future directions, of course, you heard a very detailed presentation from me in October outlining a lot of these, so I'll just cover them really quickly. Of course, the growth in size and diversity of the seniors population and older adults is outlined in the report, especially the baby boomer generation and the new immigrant to Canada. Of course, this makes PRC services have to both anticipate and respond to these different needs that are out there. Active adults are redefining notions of aging, and of course, they're challenging our stereotypical and traditional beliefs of what their leisure looks like. The casual, project-based, and serious leisure items that you saw talked about in this report really shift us away from thinking of just programs to really why people are participating in things and what needs they want to get met through their leisure. The participation constraints and barriers, both the personal and systemic barriers, we talked about that quite a bit in the October presentation. Intergeneral opportunities and finding the balance between the best practices of having generations play together to the specific seniors' needs that we hear from people, where they want to have time and space to themselves and to do their own things. Of course, social engagement and connection, we know that this is one of the biggest contributors to overall health. And multi-use facilities, we also now know that 1/2 of our one-pass users are 50 plus, which was extraordinary to me because I come from the background of thinking that, wow, a lot of leisure participation is by kids, but really in our own facilities, this means that all of our civic facilities are slowly becoming older adult seniors facilities right in front of us. And what does that mean 10 to 15 years from now? What will those facilities look like? And what kind of broad scope of amenities and flexible spaces do we need to make sure exist in these multi-use facilities? This gets us to the four goal areas. Oh, I got a dry mouth. Which are further broken down into 18 action items in the strategy. They are prioritized 1 to 3, just in terms of what we will tackle first as a department. And in the executive summary at the front of the strategy, you'll see we've kind of included a top 10 for your easy review. We'll just start to go through these really quickly because they're in more detail starting on page 20 of the strategy. The first goal is to ensure access and inclusion for all. Of course, level 1 is reviewing our pricing structure and examining the assumption that subsidy has to be based on age. We need to look at adopting a multi-age service delivery model in our facilities with times and spaces for people who are older adults or seniors. And of course, Council will be shortly seeing the proposed departmental recreation program policy that will be coming forward hopefully in the next month or so. This departmental policy is the framework and guideline for services and partnerships, and will give us a guideline and a framework to see how programs are developed and offered throughout the city. We need to look at our financial assistance program. Many of you know it as the Get Connected, Get Active program, and how can we get more seniors involved in that program and using that service. We need to review and enhance our park access, including safety and access features. And we are planning on investigating a transportation initiative, recognizing that many seniors do not drive, and also some are unable to take public transit for many reasons, whether they live too far away from a bus stop, or they don't feel safe, or there's too many stairs to get to the bus stop. There's many things that factor into the use of public transportation. And in some municipalities, there's a partnership between the city and the senior services centers to provide transportation options. So we'd like to look at that a little more closely. Goal number 2, provide excellence in program and service delivery. We want to establish service agreements with the advisory boards in our pavilions to make sure we're all aligned with the goals of the master plan. And again, the recreation policy pops up here as well. We want to consider partnerships and outreach service delivery, especially to reach underserved and isolated seniors in our community. We want to enhance those intergenerational opportunities that we know are a best practice, while also respecting the age-appropriate needs of seniors. And we want to examine those service gaps for older adults, especially those that are still working. We know that not everyone gets to retire at 65 or chooses to retire. And what do we do for those folks that are still working and managing that kind of a lifestyle? Our third goal focuses on improving communication and collaboration. We want to look at renaming the pavilions and considering replacing that word pavilion with something like a 50-plus recreation center. So it actually says what happens in that building and what emanates from that building. We'd like to work with corporate communications on a communication plan to increase awareness of the range of the programs that are out there, because many told us they didn't know what was out there. We'd like to increase English practice opportunities, and I think this is an exciting one because there's many ways to combine recreation programs and volunteerism with the opportunity to learn some English skills, and we've heard from folks that that's really important to them in this city. And we'd like to strengthen tri-city collaboration, exploring partnerships and opportunities for efficiencies and better service. Lastly, the fourth set of goals revolve around developing volunteer and staff resources. We'd like to look at a 5-year volunteer plan that looks at recruitment and retention of volunteers and recognition of those project-based and serious leisure needs that folks are trying to get met through their leisure participation. We'd also like to work with our pavilion advisory boards to build their capacity and get greater diversity on those boards, and also use them as a specific support to our outreach activities to help us find those underserved and isolated seniors. A second level goal for this is to complete a staff learning assessment. Do our staff, what are the gaps in knowledge for our staff? What do they need to know about working with seniors and older adults, and how do we bridge that gap of knowledge? And we've heard from seniors in this community that they'd like us to consider seniors at the council advisory level. So what does this look like? What are the ways that seniors' perspectives can be further represented at that level? So our next steps: present the draft strategy to the advisory boards and council advisory committees, incorporate all of this feedback and the census data that we know is coming into the strategy, present the final strategy to council sometime later this year, and then, of course, we will take that and develop the implementation and the work plan. And that's my 10 slides.
Yes, thanks very much. We appreciate this. It's a lot of very good work and timely work. It was just last week we heard from Census Canada that the latest breakdown of the numbers is for the first time in the country's history, we now have more 65-plus people at 5.9 million in Canada than we do children. Under the age of 14 is 5.8 million. So we're right on top of this trend, which is good. I think there's really a lot of very good goal areas here. You've enunciated many of them. I want to just ask a question about a couple of them. And it's pretty specific, or make some comment about maybe a disconnect. The renaming of the pavilions. I agree the pavilions should be renamed because pavilion doesn't really mean anything other than gathering place under a tent or something. But in your report, and the suggestion is to name the 50-plus recreation center. But I think in the actual staff report at the beginning of the, before we see the strategy, the draft strategy, there was a statement that said, that talked about the renaming. Whoops, I'm just trying to find it here. Where was it? Somewhere else. Oh, yeah. Renaming the pavilions to clarify that these are recreation facilities and that a broader age demographic is welcome supports this goal. Now, I thought by that you meant to reflect the fact that on evenings and weekends, there's a lot of people of all age groups, children, teens, and things like that go in there. So when I read that, that's what I thought you were getting at, and then I saw in the report that it's actually one of the 50 plus. So is your idea that the 50 plus renaming would reflect that broader age demographic is welcome? Because that, to me, maybe it sends a signal that it's just not the 70 plus that's welcome there, because that seems to be about the average age, maybe 75 that use the pavilion now. But at the same time, it doesn't really send a message that in the evenings and weekends, this facility is good to go for families and children and things like that as well. So maybe explain your thinking about why you're recommending or suggesting 50 plus rather than something that's even more encompassing.
Sure.
An idea about, can you explain that?
Sure, through the chair.
Madam Chair, she's looking for permission to answer that question. Okay.
Yes, it's complicated. You're correct in that many of the current participants at the pavilions are in their mid-60s, and they don't attract the younger older adult, the 50 plus. And many folks perceive the pavilions to be true senior centers, and they don't identify with them. That's a place for seniors. They don't understand in their 50s that actually the low-impact yoga or many of the other classes or opportunities that are there would speak to their leisure needs, because they don't understand what is in a pavilion. So by the simple renaming of 50 plus, we're sending a message that all older adults are welcome. At the same time, we would not be changing the current programming that is there. So the current programming that is there is already multi-aged in a sense. Glen Pine, all ages are welcome at many times of the day. They've worked with the advisory board. They found a way to make that work. At Dogwood Pavilion, after 4 o'clock, of course, all types of programming happens there of families of all ages. So it's meeting the needs of the seniors that are there, so they don't feel that they're losing their sense of space, and that they're going to be a lot of youth in the center, or the programs are changing, yet it's also sending a message that older adults and seniors are welcome in these buildings.
So what you're saying is you're really looking for a word that says 50 plus and more somehow.
Somehow.
Plus. That's going to be my next line, but sorry, I'll be a little confusing. So, yeah, I understand the difficulty in it. So certainly it's a step in the right direction to better describe what the pavilion's primary purpose is. It's good, but I'm just a little concerned that it's, in doing so, it ends up excluding the other uses that are already there for the younger people somehow. That sends a stronger message that actually this isn't your center. So got to watch that. Now, another thing was the outreach in terms of where you're going to be sending the draft senior strategy for feedback. You said this city advisory, all the city advisory committees that might have an interest in this, plus the boards of Glen Pine and Dogwood. Now, coincidentally, just yesterday, the council received a message from the Tri-City Seniors Planning Network inviting us to one of their meetings tomorrow. And I contacted Mr. Kuhn, who's the liaison, and he didn't know anything about this and about the strategy, and would really like to have his group involved somehow. And especially given that you've said that, well, this is one of the goals here is to strengthen Tri-Cities cooperation. This is apparently a Tri-Cities Seniors Planning Network. It would make sense to me to have a greater connection with them. So I hope that you can contact that group. I've set you up on this already, so you can just confirm it publicly. You're going to be doing that, I hope.
I'll be happy to follow up with that group. Yes.
That's good. Thank you. And So very good work. I just actually have one complaint though. You didn't seek my permission to use my photograph on the front page of the actual draft strategy. It's maybe my slightly older brother, but very interesting. Now it's not me; it's my doppelganger. I guess I'm a gang member. It's my doppelganger. Thank you very much. Keep up the good work.
Councillor Atkinson.
Interesting report. I think under the senior strategy, you could put a byline of looking toward your future.
For everybody.
For everybody.
It's a hopeful statement, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Or been there, done that.
For some of us. I guess my comment came around against once about I like the intergenerational concept. But it comes into the renaming of the pavilions. We have 2 pavilions.
Yes.
And if we expand, let's say into the Northeast, are we going to have another center, or are we going to just have strictly an intergenerational facility that is not really specific? Because I guess relating this to me is a bit that a lot of seniors, while they want it intergenerational, they also want to be, they don't connect well with, so they want their own time instead, which we do right now. But what I also found in some of the senior centers I've touched on with people is that some of the people, like myself, in their 50s, in their early 60s, are very active. And even in these centers, there's a competition. Like sometimes the older people, the 75 plus, feel a little bit intimidated in those centers. Now, have you looked at some ways of programming or managing some of those internal issues in those age groups that are presently there?
To the chair. We do look at that. It can be difficult because, of course, people come because they're passionate about an activity, and that person may be 55 or they may be 75. What will likely happen, though, as the numbers of seniors increase, is that we will be able to further offer perhaps, I don't know, age segregated, like volleyball 55 to 65, volleyball 75 to 85, just because of the sheer numbers that are in those age categories. But we do look at it. And to your question about the Northeast, facility development, of course, the trend or the future of facility development, you'll see it happening all over the Lower Mainland, is that senior services happen and emanate out of multi-use buildings because people get more use out of a building that has everything. And you can program certain types of programs that you know are going to be applicable to older adults during the daytime, or at times you know they're going to come, and then you do your programming later for children and youth. So you can control building access through types of programs offered.
Well, no, and I think that's probably the way to go. It's more efficient use of a building. I just think, though, when we look at the 2 pavilions we presently have, and naming, even like with 50 plus, I was thinking the same thing Councillor Neal was, that you're going to have to find a 50 plus multi-use or something to allow the people under 50 at these times can use it. So if you just say 50 plus, it gives away idea that it's only for those people above, and it's not that intergenerational facility. Because once again, it helps you maximize the use of those pavilions. Even though we're using them right now to get out to that broader community, they still look at those pavilions, unless they know somebody, as not being places that they go to. Mm-hmm. So I think you really have to look at some way with the naming to broaden that 50. And I don't have Mr. O'Neill's the great English, or Mayor Stewart, but I do think it has to be more inclusive into those younger, under 50 generations. And we have a couple of those on the council still. You're very lucky. You have a lot of experience for this issue at this council now. Thank you.
Councillor Reeves.
Speaking for the under 50s, I want to thank you for this, but I look at it and I have to sort of giggle. First of all, renaming the pavilions, I want you to promise me, because those of us who are over 50 remember the Golden Girls and that dreaded Shady Pines place. Do not name either of them Shady Pines, and I'm sure when you get to those pavilions they'll all know what that means. It's not a good place. Mobility issues. We are... Bonita's committee, we are participating for the first time this year with Spark, isn't it? Spark? BC Access and trying to move forward with some of the wonderful things that we do in this city. And Councillor Asmussen has included in his Welcome to Coquitlam so that we can sort of broadcast some of the wonderful accessibility things we're moving in. And I think there is a real lack of understanding on how much the city does in that area. And so I think that I think sometimes we don't toot our own horn in the right venue. I think we have lots to offer that we could be doing more with. And exactly how, I'm not quite sure, but I have some ideas. So, since I moved a couple of years ago in 2014 to across the street at Princess Gate, we have 189 apartment units there. And they have a wonderful social group there. It's just really great. They have lots of stuff going on. One of the things as the new owners move in and folks move out, one of the things that was always really, really popular is drop-ins. So as far as staff training goes, you can train staff all you want, but if you don't have the people for them to work with, it doesn't help. But drop-ins, either here at City Hall, at some of the pavilions, but sometimes even at Pine Tree Center, drop-ins so that people get to know what programs we have to offer, and opportunities for seniors who can help with all the life and business experience they have. We are probably one of the only folks in the world that don't revere our seniors. We sort of just want to, you're there, Mom, so here you go. Here's your little condo in the sky and go live there for the rest of the year, when they may have lots of stuff to offer. There are lots of seniors out there with so much to offer that we don't take advantage of, and we could, and it's good for everyone. One of the youth groups had asked me, I was at Pine Tree not long ago, and the kids were out in the lobby and they were teaching each other to use some new gadget. I'll just call it a gadget because that's my language. It was some computer thing. And I'm saying, so what is it? And they're going, oh, it's a language I wouldn't even understand if I tried. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, what an opportunity for this intergenerational after school. Come on over and the kids are going to sit with you one-on-one and teach you how to use all these gadgets. I don't know if we do a lot of that. We do some of it. I think we have to broaden our scope to take advantage of experience, and there is a lot. There's in cooking, weaving, all kinds of things that some folks love to do. And drafts, sending out your drafts. I'd be very interested if we have a lot of seniors-only buildings in Coquitlam, and sending notes out to strata and having a drop-in session in the council chambers. You'd probably get a lot of people and say, what would you like to see? Anything special that would draw you to the centers? And last but not least, one of the things that we're finding across the street is lots of people have grandkids and great-grandkids now, and there is definitely the cycle's changed, so these grandparents now are taking a great interest in working with their grandkids and great-grandkids, because the parents are usually working 2 jobs. It's just a different time in our lifespan. So I think there's probably lots of ready-made grandparents out there for folks that need them, and I think it would be an excellent exchange of love and ideas. So on and upwards, but I think the staff training will come just by having, the show up and have a cup of coffee and give us your bright ideas, and it won't take staff long to figure out where they have to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. There's a couple of words that caught my attention, and it was underserved and isolated. First of all, thank you for the report. There are lots of segments, though, of our population that are underserved and end up isolated. And it's not because we don't have programs for them, but because they either are isolated because of many times cultural barriers. There's some other barriers such as mental health issues and things that might isolate people. And I don't know if there's a more strategic way of approaching the isolation as an issue by itself rather than the age of the person who's isolated as an issue. And so I'm asking a theoretical sort of general question that doesn't relate specifically to the 50-plus population. We know anecdotally that the Pershing community, for example, had a lot of seniors that ended up isolated in the wave that arrived 20 years ago, and haven't been able to be successfully brought into, largely because of language barriers. We don't have as much, I don't think, with some of the current immigrant population, largely because it's younger, and don't have that many seniors among them. But I don't know how to reach out more cohesively, in a more targeted way to find, identify, and serve those that are significantly isolated, regardless of age. How's that for a question with no answer?
Is it a question?
Yes, sorry. Those with no, regardless of age?
I'm not sure, through the chair, I'm not sure I'll be able to answer the question, although we're certainly, my own mother, we've been here 40 years, and she's culturally isolated. I mean, so even though she's close to the cultural organization which she belongs to, I think we need to reach out to those cultural organizations as well. So there's many factors, and certainly it's not economic. So it's a complicated question. When we talked about isolation, it really is many dimensions to it: cultural, language, social, personal, and it's a really, really interesting issue. I think as we flesh out and we reach out, I think part of it is reaching out to cultural organizations that some of these individuals may be attuned to, and other groups that we deal with, to find out the best way to access them. But it's a very big question, Mayor Stewart, and I think we're attuned to this. It's going to be a growing issue for our community. And this is a park, recreation, and cultural strategy. We're trying to focus on what leisure services people may take advantage of and may be seeking, but we also don't. So it's not a huge holistic strategy. But on the other hand, it can be huge. It can be amazing what people may be able to access and connect to their community through leisure services. So we're certainly very, very interested in that question. Don't have the answer, but it's a great question, and it's on the forefront of our minds as something we're thinking about.
I love that kind of response. I don't have an answer, but I admire the question. Did you want to? Did you have something?
Answer you, yeah.
Madam Chair, go ahead.
Just what about when I say youth and seniors, or youth and older folks, doesn't matter if they're seniors or not. We have lots of kids from different places coming here. And why can't they work with their grandparents and the seniors that don't have anybody? That's what I'm getting at. We do have a resource in the young folks that are here with the different multicultural backgrounds. Just thought.
No, absolutely. I think the issue of isolation isn't a 50-plus pavilion sort of a question. It's a much broader question, and it exists for persons with disabilities. It exists for persons with who aren't typical, let's say, whether it's sexual orientation or faith. In many cases, there's all kinds of reasons why, and things that we could do as a society to try to embrace and help them break through the isolation. Isolation is a significant cause of mental health issues. It's also a significant result of mental health issues. It's one of those things. On the question of the name pavilion, for example, Glen Pine Pavilion, I think, was renamed by engineering. There's a wayfinding sign on Glen that says Glen Pine Center, notwithstanding that council named that after a significant public consultation process that achieved the name Glen Pine Pavilion at the request of largely of the members of at the time the Pine Tree.
I see the general manager making notes.
Pine Tree Seniors Center, which was originally at Town Center Park, and then over to the joint facility at Pine Tree Rec Center. And eventually when Glen Pine opened, there was a challenge. What do we name it? And for consistency, they picked pavilion, and then they tried to figure out, well, it's not Pine Tree anymore, but perhaps it's on Glen, so let's go Glen Pine, and as a result, we ended up with Glen Pine Pavilion by council resolution, though. So I think we need to recognize that as well. I know that there's a couple of few members at Glen Pine that have already renamed it, but we should put our minds to, including one who used to be on council. So I think it's not a irrelevant subject. It's something that we should put our minds to figure out ultimately not so much what they've historically been called, but what they should be called. And lastly, we heard a lot of people in the last, let's just say in the calendar year 2014, I won't refer to any political reality, but we heard a lot of people talking about how they didn't like you, and because of a phrase in an article in the paper that said that maybe folks, we can be more intergenerational with our senior centers, and I want us to embrace those thoughts. We also accept, though, that Glen Pine Pavilion and Dogwood Pavilion are a very small percentage of our seniors population. And for some reason, a lot of our 50-plus don't participate there, and could, perhaps. And so the Tri-Cities, because Port Moody also participates heavily in Glen Pine and Dogwood, find out what would attract seniors in general to the pavilions, we'll call them now, rather than what do the folks that are at the pavilion want.
Yes.
But in the end, I want us to make the choice that not what they tell us they prefer is what we should be, we should be heading, not where we think they should prefer. And ultimately, I've said publicly that I will always support a 50-plus center that focuses its attention on 50-plus, and is a center for those who are 50-plus. And I'll stop there.
Councillor Wilson?
Okay, thanks. Let's pick up on the name. There's got to be best practices somewhere in the world that figured it out already, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on a name. Definitely not having us come up with a name. Multi-generational, intergenerational, awesome. Poco does a great dinner every week with the seniors center there. I know the Centennial secondary students were doing technology stuff with the Dogwood people, but I think it also has a potential to go both ways too, right? And mentorship, yes, and that sort of thing. So I think that's something to work or build on. Transportation. Do any of our pavilions have any kind of carpooling system in place?
It would be informal, an informal.
Maybe
I'll
that's
pick you up.
before we start subsidizing buses, maybe we try a carpooling system first or something. I don't know. I really like the idea of building up the senior advisory council idea, or the advisory boards of the pavilions to be able to be more robust and diverse. I think that's fantastic. We talked a lot about social isolation. We talked about transportation issues. In the future, there's going to be more and more housing issues, and I know it's probably outside of the scope of this, but there's a great, I don't know if it was an article or opinion piece in the Vancouver Sun on Saturday, I think it was, about a facility in Australia. And, a lot of the issues that they were dealing with at that facility are in this strategy, right? Not that, it has a rec center, but, so maybe there's a lot of synergies there between houses. We own an assisted living facility now. And, so not that we provide the housing, but is there anything that we can do within our planning department to try to ensure that down the road we have, Abbotsford has a great campus of senior housing, and you can go from one level of care to another, right? And I would love to see something like that, and Coquitlam or the Tri-Cities at least. And again, we can't necessarily dictate to the market what's needed, but if we can try to keep that in mind and work towards those issues. Because, there are a lot of seniors that are living in big, old houses in Coquitlam that want to get out of them. And if we can try to, nudge them into, a more appropriate facility that's going to be able to provide them a lot of the stuff that we're talking about in this strategy, it frees up more land for us to redevelop, the gentle density that we were talking about earlier. And I think it would be great. So again, I know it's outside of our scope, and I don't know if it's something that planning is already working on, but it would be worthwhile, I believe, to try to coordinate the two. Any thoughts on all that?
Any specific
You raised your
question?
voice at the end.
Sorry.
Not my area of expertise.
No, that's fine. I don't. Sometimes I get frustrated that we just spew all kinds of stuff out, and you guys write notes, and then you don't give us anything back, and so I just
break it up.
If I'm totally off base or left field, just let me know. But
Was there any discussion about housing, and is that specifically what you want
I
to
guess
know
maybe
about?
the housing side of it, yeah, because the other ones are pretty standard.
Through the chair, it was out of the scope of this consultation.
But do you think that
At this
in going forward, it might warrant sort of more cooperation with planning, or is that just too?
I think that's. What I would say through the chair is that as our communities evolve, I think we have to continue to take a close look at how seniors are being housed and the services that they have available to them, and there's an evolution over a lifetime. We see our needs evolve, and as you age, I think there is a very strong connection, but at this point I think we'd have to, this is a programmatic, policy-based kind of strategy in what we offer in our facilities. I do think what's happening outside of those facilities will continue to change the way we provide services, and we have to keep a very close tie with what's going on out there. That's the long answer, and then respond to it as opposed to be proactive on the housing side. That's for my department's role. Certainly we're always in touch with planning, and some things being discussed in terms of densification and services available to, and if you do have communities that are largely seniors, then the outreach part of it would be potentially a much greater role that we might play in some of those communities from our own role. But it would have to evolve. This would be my very vague answer.
Yeah, I understand that. I just, when we lost the Burquitlam Lions facility, you had all kinds of grandparents moving out of our city, and you think of those families and how often they're seeing their grandparents now. And so I think if we can try to be intentional about it and proactive, and try to provide I guess the right kind of environment for those kind of facilities to be established and to grow, that would dovetail, I guess, with what you're doing. Mm-hmm. This is probably more of the point. Yeah. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Towner.
Thank you. This is a great report. I look forward to more of the input, though, from the seniors. As I was reading it, I was really happy to see, I made the same notes as Mayor Stewart about isolation and finances. That's not just for seniors, the isolation factor that he spoke about, but also the finances. I've had multiple conversations with numerous seniors over the years where they actually feel guilty or offended that there's seniors pricing, because they raised their kids in an era when houses were a fraction of what younger people pay now. Times were different. They had lifetime employment. They have these big pensions, and they can afford to pay the full price, and not all of them, and you've acknowledged that in here. So I'm glad that, yes, there are segments of our population that need subsidy and need financial assistance, and I think there's an opportunity here where you discovered that 15% of Coquitlam seniors live in poverty, yet only 26% of this 15% have the Get Connected, Get Active card. So there's an opportunity there to do outreach to that other 74% of the 15%. But I'm glad that you'll be looking at the finances for seniors as far as, rather than the whole population, like what Mayor Stewart was saying about the isolation as well, so I won't talk about that. And I'm curious about the outreach. Have we, talking about social media and whatnot, that the seniors population, is it harder to outreach them because are they not on social media as much and online, or are they now? So I thought this communication plan, what's the strategy there to do the outreach if they're not online?
I think there's multiple ways to do it. You can work with agencies, the library. It's finding out where people are going, where they go already naturally. So most people have to grocery shop, or they go to the library, or they visit places. Where are those places naturally where people are going? And I think we would all be surprised at the number of seniors that are on social media now.
Yeah.
I think we make assumptions that they're not, but usually they've been taught by their grandkids because they want to share pictures and they want to keep in touch, and the grandkids live everywhere. My own mom, who's 80, is on it more than I am. And who knows what she's looking at, but she's on there.
That's awesome.
Well, making all kinds of comments on what I'm doing. So it is certainly more than I think we stereotypically think people are doing. So
Right, and there was, I guess, a slight stereotype there, but again, this is conversations that I've had with people. And then I also want to just comment on, back in 2014, I heard very loudly and very clearly, talking to lots of residents, that they were dead set against any kind of intergenerational.
Yeah.
Like, it was really loud and really clear, and that wasn't what I wanted to talk about. But so I'm curious if that's changed in 3 years. If people are, like what Councillor Reid was saying, are people realizing the benefit of having the younger people around, or will it still say, will there be options for separation? I'm just very curious about that.
we tried to promote in the report and in this strategy that there is a need for both, because through the consultation it was almost split right down the middle.
Yeah.
50% of the folks said, yeah, intergenerational, it's great. 50 said, nope, done my time with young people. I want the place to myself with my peers who are going through the same aging issues I'm going through, and we want to connect at that level. So we heard loud and clear, both are necessary, and that's what we're trying to find the balance with too, is both types of services.
Oh, that's great. And I also just want to say I'm really happy about the building advisory board capacity and about the volunteer plan. I've done a lot of volunteer recruitment and coordination and management over the years, and some of the best volunteers are the older population. And it gives them something to look forward to, especially if they're widowed or single, and they're really dedicated, they show up on time. But they don't all know of the opportunities available to have these, to volunteer. So I think that's an awesome part of the strategy. And I don't know if somebody brought this up, but I'm curious about the transportation. Would that be something like a handy dart, or would it just be at set times during the day, or is it just wide open right now? Because
wide open for exploration. I mean, I'm really interested in the idea of the carpooling. I think that's something we could look at. But there's other models that are out there too. I mean, I think of the one in Delta, where through the senior center, there's a North Delta bus that we'll see. Handy Dart prioritizes based on medical appointment first, followed by recreation pursuits. So if you can imagine that medical appointments books up Handy Dart right away for seniors, and getting to the mall or getting to a recreation center comes lower on Handy Dart service priority. So in Delta, for example, the Delta bus takes you to your doctor's appointment, rec centers, to the senior centers, and to shopping. And you just register through the senior center. So there's some models out there that would be interesting to look at. Okay. We don't have an answer in mind. We just want to explore some things and see what might work here.
Well, I'm very curious about the outcome of some of this consultation, but thank you very much. Good work.
Councillor Asmundson?
Just a couple of items. Mayor Stewart mentioned about Glen Pine, the previous, but actually prior to coming Glen Pine, it was actually the 50-plus society down there, because they didn't want to connect with Pine Tree because it was confusing.
That's right.
So we're going back actually to what they were before we changed them to Glen Pine Pavilion in a different format of name. Social isolation is a difficult one, and even when you take about outreach, whether social media or not, a lot of people, and we've been doing a lot of trying this on our Multicultural Committee when we do our Welcome to Coquitlam event, through faith groups, all sorts of groups. But the difficulty you find, and I've looked into this, is a lot of people in getting the hard people out is fear. And a lot of those people have certain personalities or the fear of not knowing anybody, going into an environment that holds them back. So I think there needs to, I think as was mentioned before, either some family members or other people to go there with them to help them integrate. Because just by having them saying they're alone or whatever, come to this center or whatever, there's a big fear of going there, not knowing anybody, not being liked, rejected. And I think a lot of those people, there's different issues behind people that are socially isolated, just not age. I mean, they go through all age groups. But we've been really working hard the last number of years trying to keep all the ethnic areas, all the faith groups, multiple areas. And my big push is through the multicultural thing is to let's reach those hard to reach people. And it's not an easy just we need social media or whatever answer. There's underlying issues among that. You also said in your report about, I forgot to mention before, is about English services. Now, are you talking about the city providing more English language services, or are you talking about working to connect people with existing English language services like at the library, Success, ISS, or what? So when I looked at the report and I read through it, I didn't get a clear understanding of what you were getting at in that area.
I think there's room for both. I mean, currently I can speak to some of the programming at Glen Pine, which is specific English language conversation. So it's like a coffee meetup, and you come for coffee and a sandwich, and then you chat in English with a volunteer at the table who helps you practice your English skills. That's a very informal yet really effective way of learning English. And at the same time, you are introduced to our recreation services and you get to meet some people. So there's that part of it. The other part of Glen Pine is that a lot of people volunteer there to increase their language skills. So they'll volunteer at the till, at the in the cafeteria, because they'll learn what they find is an employable skill as well as English at the same time. So it's just taking those things that are already happening and maybe growing them a bit. So for those volunteers that are volunteering with us to contribute and who want to learn English, maybe we can offer them a little more. Like, okay, once a week, if you're volunteering with us, come to our English practice language class 2. You'll become a better volunteer. You'll learn English. There's kind of ways to cross-program, but we're happy to work with other agencies, too, to see what they're doing and how we can work together.
Well, the library runs a lot of good programs right here in Town Center and up there for English. I think a lot of times, I think the program you're talking about at Glen Pines is a good program, conversational. But I think if we can work with the other agencies that provide these classes and introduce these people the opportunities to go into those classes to further their education. It's kind of interesting now that I've been driving the bus, I pick up different people of ethnic and seniors. And a lot of them some of them are strictly bypassing the senior center, and they have almost no English skills when they get on. But they're going into the pool and those facilities directly themselves and taking programs out of there, which is quite neat to see because they're doing what they like, they're doing it, but they're still not accessing the pavilions or the 50 plus, but they're accessing. These are immigrants from different cultures that have very limited English skill. And there's some that I pick up on a regular basis all the time going and bypassing. And so you wonder how you can take those people that are going to those facilities that may have limited English skills, how you then have those facilities can translate or encourage them that there's at the Dogwood Pavilion or Glen Pine that there are ways that they can join and there's language translation or people that can help them access those facilities there. That's just another thought that I see quite often.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have a few comments. I got a bunch of notes. So, first of all, it's great facility focus. Like I do see the need for us to make sure that we are backfeeding for our senior centers for sure, that we need to get people comfortable with it and out to it. I had the pleasure of being at the AGM for the Dogwood Seniors Group, and I have to say they were pretty vocal about not wanting to cross-pollinate on many of those things. And there was a real split between men and women. Men were a lot more comfortable with having younger people there because they're not doing exercise, they're not doing as much physical stuff that the women are looking for from those pavilions. So I thought that was interesting, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But one of the things they did talk at AGM was about their financial commitment to that Dogwood Pavilion. At some point in time, they had made financial contributions, and they felt that they had some ownership over that. So it was a very interesting meeting, and that is going to be something that we're going to have to manage. But I guess the one piece that I'd like to go back a bit, like after I read the study, I had way more questions about the people. I really wanted to understand. I was hoping that we would come out of here with a very clear picture of who uses the current pavilions and what the 50s to 65s are doing, and then what the 65 plus are doing right now as far as behavior goes. So Mayor Stewart said for some reason a lot of our 50 plus aren't using the pavilions, and why? Did we get to the root of why those people that are in that 50 to 65 aren't coming in, and then maybe why that 65 plus aren't coming in? Did we get that out of the survey?
I don't think there's a really easy answer to that. I mean, people are going to go to the place that best meets their needs. And if that need is physical activity or swimming or weight room or stuff that's offered at our larger centers, that's where they're going to go. It also depends on their work schedule. Most of the opportunities at Dogwood that are drop-in don't happen after 5 o'clock. So people will seek out the facility to go to based on what their needs are. And if they can't find it, then they will go elsewhere or find another municipality, or that need will go unmet. So it's hard to say. I mean, I think the younger senior wants to be active and involved and engaged, and whether it's perception or reality, the current pavilion programming opportunities, whether it's constrained by the type of facility that the pavilions are, can't meet all those needs.
So I'd like to see, I should have emailed, but I just didn't have time, but I'd like to see the survey questions again, and then also I would like to see the responses, because I'd like to get a better understanding of the behavior and who these people are. So I'm just going to go with the notes. I do like the idea of some integration, not necessarily in the pavilions, but even you mentioned it, it's happening anyway at the pool and all these other places. So, but I'd like to understand how engaged are our current seniors. I didn't see many stats. I did see the hard to reach, and I made a note about the hard to reach. What is the hard to reach, right? Like, who is it? What's the profile? What's the demographic profile of that hard to reach? And maybe the ROI is not doable on the hard to reach. Maybe we need to focus on the 90, 85%. So I need some numbers on there. So then also, this is a generation that men and women does matter. The women ran the household, the women signed up everything, the woman and the husband and the wife go together quite a bit at 65 plus to stuff. So I would love to see the difference between how women are engaging and how men are engaging, that 50 to 65 and that 65 plus. Because we also know that 65 plus, we're going to have a lot more women on their own, right? So what are they searching for? What are they seeking? I've heard right now, even at one of our pavilions, that there are rooms in that pavilion where women don't go because it's a men group in there. The men are playing pool or whatever they're doing. It's not a space that's welcoming for the women to come into, and I have heard that there's that. So I also would like to understand what are the activities that men are avoiding and why, and what are the activities that women are avoiding and why. One of them I know with some of those rooms, and like I just said in Dogwood, it's because it's not a open, accepting space for the women to go into. I'd also like to see, there was something referred to here about project-based leisure, serious leisure, casual leisure. I'd love to see heavy user versus light user. Who's the heavy user of the pavilion? Who's the heavy user of each of these Glen Pines? Like, what's their demographic profile? What are they using? Because at the end of the day, there's probably a really big difference between light and heavy users. And I guess I wanted to see this survey because I wanted to understand, did we ask the question, are you here multiple times a week or once a month? Do we ask that question in the survey?
I believe we do on the master plan survey. Now, there's many forms of consultation that got all this data. So there's the consultation questions and the survey data.
Because I'd love to see that. I'd love to see who's the heavy user at Glen Pine and Dogwood. What are they doing at the facility as far as programming? One of the things that came up at the Dogwood AGM, which I thought was so incredible, they talked about food. That so many are coming there at lunchtime, but then they're taking the food, they're taking a takeaway to have for dinner. And there was discussion about if there was a 4 o'clock dinner time or a 5 o'clock meal that was served at the pavilions. Not saying that we should do it, but just food is an incredible way to get people engaged, right? And if we're talking about how we can get them engaged, I thought that was interesting. Where are we going to reach them? Well, I know a lot of them are at the mall. A lot of those that aren't connected are at the mall because they have English barriers, or they can't read, or they have those things, and I know they're at the mall. So the mall, I'm interested about the mall, social media. Is it restaurants, parks, libraries, stratas, clinics, hospitals? Someone said today about the young people, SD43. Like, I'm really interested to know what are the availability or options to do stuff through those spaces. Where are they? I made a note about the Dogwood White Cane group if we're doing consultation. I know even my own mother doesn't go out because her sight is now a little bit more limited, and she finds that really hard to deal with. So I made a note, I'd like to know the percentage of the hard to reach. What are the actual numbers on addressing fees and subsidy allocation? I'd like to know those actual numbers. The transit shuttle was an interesting one. That could be an intergenerational one. I'm wondering if it would have wider purpose. A shuttle from Burke Mountain down to the SkyTrain station could maybe be paired with a seniors one. So I'm interested in exploring that too. But I would look at it even wider. And then just some comments about the safety and the comfort of intergenerational. I totally get it that we need to have users coming up the back end, but there are a lot of, women for sure, that have issues with the safety and the comfort when we're talking about intergenerational groups and people that are a lot more physically active than they are. And I think we can't not have that in the senior strategy, just how reliant men are on their partner, and especially with these seniors that have come up where the men were traditionally the breadwinners, and they're coming out of a role, and women are carrying on in a caregiver's role. So, yeah. So, is there any chance of getting the demographic breakdown and stuff, like getting the actual data just to have a look at it? I'd just like to have a look at it myself to have an understanding.
Yes, we'll do as well. So we'll just kind of mine through the questions, and we'll try and get as much information as we can on some of the requests, whatever we have available. We'll provide that to all of council, whatever we have, and the thinking is we can still go out and consult, but then bring all that together. Does that work for all of council? But we will provide whatever data has been discussed here, largely the request from Councillor Zerillo. I think we did have some of the finance information on the percentage under Get Active, Get Connected versus, but we will actually go through the minutes today and make sure we have as much data provided to you. And at the same time, look at where we can expand our consultation. I think we talked about the committees and the pavilions, but clearly we want to do a few other things that can get the word out and get some greater consultation on the strategy.
Yeah, I was just trying to picture who is the user, right? Like, who is the user at Glen Pine? Who is the user at Dogwood? Who's the users that are not going to the pavilion? Like, I really want to know the people more than the facilities. And I want to say I signed up for the Nordic walking at Glen Pine. It's 4 ladies. It's 4 ladies that have signed up. But I found it very interesting that the person that's running the Nordic walking is focusing also on conversations around health and other facilities and other things that are available. So I think that is amazing. Like, you don't just go there and she talks to you about Nordic walking. She talks to you about your whole health and wellness and how to get engaged in. So I really appreciate that. I think we're doing some wonderful things as far as seniors are going.
Quickly, 2 things Benita has said that have struck home for me is the timing of some of the programs that we're offering. It would be interesting, the question to ask, if you would enjoy doing whatever, stitchery or sewing or jumping jacks, would you prefer it to be at 6:37 in the evening or 3 in the afternoon? That would be really an interesting conversation to have, I think.
And is that in the survey? Like, was that asked in our survey?
Specific programming times, I don't believe that was, but a lot of really rich conversations came out of the consultations in terms of what people loved and what improvements they were looking for at the pavilion, so we can look to see if what bubbled up through that.
Yeah. And again, the stratas, the senior stratas are great. They may not all answer your questions, but boy, would they be a great resource to have a drop-in. I think drop-ins, they're it because they bring a friend and they're happy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Got us all talking. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Move receipt of the report.
Second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you.
The last formal agenda item is OB1, cigarette butt cleanup, and was raised by Councillor Phillips.
And did you have a picture?
Yes, we do.
That made me want to throw out that picture. Awful.
So this is what just about 6,000 cigarette butts look like, and this was done, it was a Saturday afternoon last weekend, and there was 4 or 5 of people that went out and just did from Pine Tree, Save-On, all the way down to the Coquitlam bus loop, and that was the 6,000 that they picked up along the way. So I wanted to just, first of all, give a shout out to those community folks that came out. It was actually led by, used to be a Riverside student at SD43, and she's working now and graduated from university, but what a great initiative. So it did, though, raise the question about how we as a city keep these cigarette butts off of the streets, and especially, I know it's been raining like crazy, but especially as the dry season comes in. So before I have my asks, I just wanted to share that I went to the farmers market last Sunday, and I walked from the farmers market over to some parking behind the library, and I couldn't go 5 feet without a cigarette butt all the way along. And then when I got to Poirier, I was walking on the south side of Poirier, right up against the building, and there was so many cigarette butts in the parking lot of the Poirier building. I thought I'm going to have to come back. So I went back on Wednesday night, and I picked up 135 cigarette butts, and I only did 8 stalls from the doors on the south side going east. And after 135 cigarette butts, I just gave up. So I did go in and speak to facilities to say, you know, what's happening here. And I guess we just have we have signage, and we're not supposed to be smoking around there anyway. We have signage, but it still happens. I also wanted to share that I've been taking my child to Town Centre Park for field hockey, and there's people smoking there in the park regularly, even those walking the loop that are smoking and flicking cigarette butts. And also too, our flaggers, I've mentioned this before, I think we need to think about, these will be my asks. The flaggers are smoking and flicking, and we're not supposed to be smoking in city vehicles, but I have to tell you, I've seen city staff flicking cigarette butts in city vehicles, and I actually have been side by side with a city vehicle that has smoking in it. So I guess I want to say that I know it's a very difficult thing to do, and I'm very pleased about the 6,000 cigarette butts that were picked up. And I actually did my City Hall cigarette butt pickup recently, and I quite regularly leave pocket ashtrays downstairs by our building where staff are allowed to smoke, and hopefully they're taking them. So here are my asks as the dry season comes up. If we could lead by example at the city, and first of all, if we could get our flaggers and our city workers kitted out with some sort of pocket ashtrays. I've got some. I've bought them personally myself. I would like to see us responsibly making sure that we're getting rid of the city cigarette butts. And then I'd also just like a reminder out to our city staff that there's no smoking allowed in city vehicles, by law cars either. Smoking is not allowed. And I'm wondering if we could have a city-led initiative on social media just around not flicking the butts, and maybe just sharing with them some of these facts of how many butts we really are picking up and the impact that it's having, and also just that we can't be smoking in parks. And I don't even know what to do about the rec center, because I mean it's hundreds and hundreds of butts around the cigarettes, around the rec centers and facilities saying like they'd have to be out there constantly to get people. So that's my ask. My asks are reminding our city staff if we could do something about the pocket ashtrays, and if we could have a city-led social media campaign about not flicking butts, especially as we move into the dry season. And I see Mr. Dumont there ready to respond.
Thank you. Yeah, through the chair, we can certainly remind staff about the rules around smoking in city vehicles and city parks and that sort of thing. When we talked about this last, we did talk about putting out information to the public about throwing cigarette butts, but we also talked about, I think people know it's wrong and they do it anyway. But we did do some work in that regard in terms of putting the message out through our website and social media, as well as that we're putting something out in the tax newsletter. We put out a thing in the utility notice, and we've also done a good neighbor brochure that talks about littering and cigarette butts. So we put the information out there about you shouldn't do it, but I don't think that's going to stop people from throwing cigarette butts on the ground. But we should certainly be setting a good example in that regard as well, so we can get the message out in terms of our staff. And I'll take it up with Kathleen in terms of what she thinks we might be able to do more. But we have pushed the word out about you shouldn't be littering and throwing cigarette butts on the ground. So we have done that piece further to our first conversation on this.
Disgusting.
Well, that would be great, and I appreciate it. And I just, when we're speaking to communications, it would be great just if they could push it now as people start using the parks again, about the fact that we shouldn't be smoking in parks. That would be amazing. Mayor Stewart?
I'll tell you, I have repeatedly several of us I know have repeatedly over the last few years posted those things. I posted one last year of one of our memorial benches in Town Center Park that was littered all around it with memorial to a different thing, and it was disgusting. And it always is. You could any of the left turn bays in Coquitlam or any other community, you'll find 1,000 butts stuck in the corner, as though cigarette butts aren't litter. And I suspect it's right that the ones that do it don't care. It's not that they don't think about it; they just don't. They don't care. It's the same with other people that litter or do other antisocial activities. I have approached some people who are about either smoking in a park or smoking in a public setting, particularly if they're getting to the end of their cigarette, and I've made sure to tell them that smoke's not permitted here, or please don't, please dispose of your butt. And I've had a couple of the butts flicked at me or onto the ground just with impunity, because it's the same as the people who don't pick up after their dog. Clamping down on them only makes them throw the bag further into the bushes after they pick up after their dog. And that's 5%. That's a small percentage, I suspect, of people, but it's one of the realities that it comes up at a lot of local government association conferences. It comes up as a ongoing complaint from a lot of our residents, and we post about it all the time. I'm glad we're raising it again here, because I think we just keep right on raising it. I happened to be downtown the other day, and I saw the fellow. He was right at the end of his cigarette, and you can tell he was about to, and he just flicked it, and the wind blew it right back at him. And I
that was good.
Well, no, I've seen there are incidents of car accidents where someone flicks it out the window and the wind blows it back into the car, and then there's an accident. So there is. It's a stupid, unsocial activity, and I'm not sure if awareness will do it, but I'm not sure how you enforce against that, because bylaw enforcement officers don't have the right to demand identification. So same thing with off leash. At least with off leash, you can take the dog. The other bylaws are really hard to enforce against an individual that isn't in a vehicle. So when they're in the parks, it's more complex. But I think every effort should be made to stop this. We're at the point now where a very small percentage of our population smokes, and we should be pushing for zero, and we should also be making sure that the ones that do smoke don't leave externalities and memorials of their stupid habits.
Councillor Towner.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say kudos to you and the volunteers for picking up that many in such a small. But I'm curious, do you take them in somewhere for recycling?
They recycle, yeah.
You do?
They recycle, yeah.
Because I don't know if you know this, but I organize a lot of litter initiatives, and I was with the Coquitlam Youth Council last week, and we picked up 4 big bags of litter in the Poirier precinct. We might have been there the same day as you. But we didn't separate the butts from the litter. And there was lots of comments about how many cigarette butts were around the library, Centennial High School, Poirier, the Forum. We only had an hour and there was only 4 of us, so we did as much as we could, but mainly the litter. But I took a picture outside the public library, right below the sign on the outside of the Poirier library, where no smoking, there was a couple hundred butts right below the sign. So I don't know if it's a staff, an employee of the library who's going out there on their break. And one thing I do find with all the litter pickup I do, when you pick up all the cigarette butts and you keep going back, it seems like there are fewer. I think the people that go to the certain benches or the certain areas, they kind of maybe notice that it's clean and stop. It's a very slow process, but I think that's fantastic. So we should be separating them?
TerraCycle, yeah, you can go on and make an account, and then you can just print off a label. And
TerraCycle, I'll have to get more information from you on that. But yeah, keep promoting the awareness. Whenever I post about this and post pictures on social media, the outrage and the support for a cleaner city is very strong. So I just have to keep the momentum going. But 6,000 cigarette butts, that's gross. Thank you.
I'm also just going to say that when I did actually clean up the area around City Hall under the parking where there is an ashtray, and there was one type of cigarette butt that had been strategically placed in the flower planter, even though there was an ashtray right there. It was the same. It was a very, very thin tapered cigarette. So it's even when there's an ashtray right beside it, it's hard to get people to do it.
I'll speak.
Thank you.
I'll speak to him again.
I need to go down there and see who it is. Thank you very much.
Last formal item on the agenda.
Okay, so okay.
Second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed?
We separated all the outies, but not the cigarette butts.